Good evening. This is for week one from the reading on desire, addiction, and human freedom. So, the questions for this week are: what is your definition of addiction and bondage? So, I'll start there. Addiction versus bondage. I really kind of had to think about the difference between those. Addiction, I more so think about something that someone is physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally attached to and can't let go of for whatever reason, whether it be a relationship or a substance abuse or um, work, whatever it may be. It's an addiction is a filling of a void. So that person seeks after something and they become addicted to it because it fills a void. Bondage, on the other hand, I had to kind of think about the sense of bondage when the Israelites were in bondage. I don't think that they were addicted to that. It was more so that something had a grasp or a hold onto them that they did not have the power to get out of. So maybe bondage is a situation where something has a hold of you and you can't get out of the situation. So, a toxic relationship that is abusive, you're not necessarily addicted to it, and you want to get out of it, but maybe you don't have the means to. So that abuse isn't filling the void, but someone or something has power over that individual, and is what I would consider bondage. Whereas someone who does have the means to get out of the relationship, but somehow almost gets this like high off of the abuse because it's filling a void, that would be more so an addiction. On recovery, I think of recovery as a potential to relapse. So you can be recovered from something for a short amount of time and then potentially relapse. Where deliverance, I think of as total healing. So no chance of potentially relapsing. Deliverance is total healing, whereas recovery could be you're over it for a certain amount of time, or maybe you've gotten out of that toxic relationship or that whatever the case may be, but then you go back to it again. So you recovered, you've bounced back from it, but then you go back to it. So, um, whereas deliverance is that you don't want to be involved with it anymore. You have something else, you have God filling that void. Um, you don't have, you don't have a need for that addiction to fill that void anymore when you're in deliverance. So, have you known anyone who recovered from addiction or been delivered from a form of bondage to sin? So, I think we've all been in some type of bondage to sin at some point in our life. Um, I think that's just the nature of sin, that it has potential to bound us for particular seasons or whatever the case may be. As it relates to addiction, my mother was addicted to cocaine for many years, which tore our family apart for a very long time. She went to rehab and became delivered from drug abuse, but then became a full blown alcoholic. So she recovered in one aspect. She was no longer addicted to cocaine or drug use, but she was still in bondage of um, substance abuse in general. Um, so she went on to be an alcoholic, and which had her bound for a very long time, where she finally recovered, and she is now in ministry and is an ordained minister. So God completely delivered her. She would not necessarily say she is a recovered alcoholic, but that she has been completely healed and that she is delivered. Um, it's funny because now that I'm reading the question about does our church have make efforts towards this type of recovery in any situation or deliverance, Pastor Johnson, I think, preaches a lot on the power of Christ in our life and the power that Christ has for deliverance, but I can't pinpoint a particular ministry that focuses on that area. So it is definitely preached from the pulpit, but as far as that type of ministry, I can't say that we really have a focus on it. I will say that our church offers resources for people who are struggling with that. So if someone were to call the church, Eastern Star would have a resource immediately for them, either a therapist or some type of recovery center. So those types of resources are available, but our church in particular is not that physical place for a resource, I would say, outside of it being preached out of scripture and from the pulpit. So as far as the reading, I thought I appreciated that the author really talked about other forms of addiction outside of substance abuse. So I think in any of our minds, immediately we go to substance abuse, but I am addicted to busyness. Like, I know that about me. It's very difficult for me to um, stay put and sit down and relax. I have to be doing something. So for me, a lot of that is filling a void of, um, I'm filling the void of silence and dealing with probably some things that I need to deal with. So I know that when I sit in silence for any period of time, that my mind begins to go places that it shouldn't go or I don't need to go. And I fill that time and that space with busyness. And it becomes an addiction because I know that I don't have to deal with certain things when I'm too busy. So I think that this course is going to be great for me in that regard. I think it can also help me in ways as far as relationships and kind of thinking about the bondage that I've put myself in other situations, and just praying for deliverance over recovery. Praying for everyone in this class. I know a little bit about everyone in this class, even though there's a few of us in here. I think that there's things in all of our lives that we can be delivered from, whether it be bondage or addiction. So I hope this helps everyone. I think I'm the first post, so no copying.